thank you for being here, and many thanks to my friend Glenn Leopold for joining us on this, the first Magic Lantern event of 2021. Our interview with a focus on his work on Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, as you already heard. I just wanted everybody to know that in 2 weeks, we're going to do another event, an interview this time with Alex Fisher. Oh, there I am. And Eleanor Wilson, who co-wrote and directed Save Yourselves, which is a great indie film. I don't know if it's even indie. It was done by a big studio. It got great reviews in the New Yorker. We are going to plan a group watch for that. And we also hoping, we've got our fingers crossed for a big surprise guest from that film. Okay, enough about the future. Let's talk about now. Well, actually, I talk about the past. If this was a pre-COVID world, neither Glenn Leopold or I would be here. That's because Tuesday was sacred to us. It was cheap movie day, and we would be in any one of Santa Barbara or Goleta's movie theaters enjoying it, probably at this point, the last of 3 movies, preferably very bad ones, from Blumhouse horror films to action movies by washed out stars like Stallone, and sci-fi post-apocalypse stories where teenagers were killed. These were our favorite. Our favorite directors were people like Nimrod Antal, who took an art house sensibility and wasted it on franchises like The Predators. We've done this for 10 years now, until this stupid plague came along. We once accidentally watched a romance film, and we still don't discuss that day. But Glenn is the best kind of movie buddy. He knows directors, stars, producers, sometimes his friends and acquaintances. His memory of oldies is sharp, and his appreciation for all kinds of movies is keen. Classic is his favorite adjective. But even given this long association with Glenn, I still don't know that much about his professional life. I know a bit about his days as a singer-songwriter in the band Gun Hill Road, but I know less about what's been going on in his life, well, since his days at Hanna-Barbera and when he was the screenwriter of horror films like The Prowler and Too Scared to Scream. So I'm going to be watching this with as much interest as everybody else is during this interview with Magic Lantern's own Hannah Garibaldi and Christine Mouton. And thank you again for everybody being here, and thank you, Glenn.
Have I gotten maximum impact from this mask?
Yeah. How about the Antal?
Yeah, we got Antal Award for best mask.
Yeah, we got Antal in there. That was good. Okay.
It's an amazing.
Oh, I just pulled my ear off.
All right. Well, I guess we'll get started with the first question that I have for you, Glenn, if you're ready.
Okay.
Awesome. So as a way to start a conversation, can you share a little bit about like the start of your career in screenwriting and animation and what inspired you to join these creative mediums?
That's a good question. I'm going to doze off now. But actually, I was working in the mailroom. I was trying to get a job as a singer-songwriter and sell my songs out in Hollywood. And I came out to California. I was staying with a friend, and I asked some people if I knew if they could help me get a job. And it was they said there's something coming up in the mailroom of Hanna-Barbera. It was changing water bottles, Arrowhead bottles, and punching animation paper in the basement and watching Mr. Hanna come down and check the expiration dates on the fire extinguishers. So I did this for kind of a while, and there was a guy named Deke Hayward who used to write for Ernie Kovacs, and he produced the Dr. Fives movies. And he was Andy Hayward, who did Inspector Gadget. He was his dad. So I used to go in there on lunch hour, and I would, nonetheless, I took the job because that wasn't paying very much. And the guy that hired me said, you know, you're overqualified, why are you taking this? And he used to say I was an executive working my way down. But anyway, I was working, so they started an apprentice writing program, and we would submit ideas. And Andy Hayward, who did Inspector Gadget later on, was across the hall from me. And we would be giving him premises for some of his shows. He was like taking all the Flintstone plots and summarizing them so he could use them as other stories. And so eventually I submitted there was a new Popeye show starting on CBS. And I started submitting ideas for it. And I had one called Spinach Fever. And it was like a Popeye imitation of Saturday Night Fever. And at the end, Bluto, was beating the heck out of Popeye. And Popeye gets his can of spinach and he gets it on the turntable. And the phonograph needle opens it up and he eats the spinach and he beats the heck out of Bluto. So the woman from CBS really liked it. And I ended up writing 13 Popeyes. They started a segment called Popeye's Treasure Hunt. And I used to use all these horrible puns like House by You, the treasure of House by You, and stuff like that. And after working for CBS for a while, I started to get working on other shows for Hanna-Barbera. And one of them was a show about these little creatures that were 3 apples high and blue. And that was called the Smurfs. And the first season, I wrote the one about Squeaky, the mouse that died by warning the village that it was on fire. And they used to teach it in death and dying classes and stuff like that. So when, I'm sorry about my voice, I've had sort of voice laryngitis.
That's all right.
But it sounds creepy like Scooby. So yeah, so after working on that, the first year, that's when Smurfs was a huge hit. And it went from an hour to an hour and a half. And they were looking for somebody to story edit the 13 half hours. And it turns out that the Smurfs was really based on what were characters in a book called The Adventures of Johann and Pee-wee that Peyo had created. And the Smurfs were just incidental characters, but then of course they stole the show. So I use these kind of medieval stories of Johann and Pee-wee. That was like a yodel, wasn't it? Johann and Pee-wee. And from then on, I worked on a lot of shows. I did the Bible for the Flintstone kids and worked on a bunch of stuff. So did I answer the question or?
Yes, you did answer the question.
I'm going to take you all the way through.
No, that was amazing. I think we can move on.
I mean, it does kind of lead into in the sort of declining days of Hanna-Barbera, not Hanna-Barbera, my career. An agent, and he had a client named Seth MacFarlane, and Seth MacFarlane got his show on after the Super Bowl, and I didn't get any meetings. So at the end, I mean, this will lead to another question you guys may have. So I'll stop here, but about how Scooby got to be chosen for the made-for-video thing. So if I have any strength, I'll continue that there. Okay, next.
Okay, yeah. So before we dive into a discussion about Zombie Island specifically, people might be more interested to hear a little bit about the process of producing an animated film like Zombie Island for a studio like Hanna-Barbera. Could you maybe provide a basic outline of what the production sequence entailed? So, who was the story, designed first? Where did the animators come in? When did the music development happen? Maybe just kind of a basic breakdown of how that went.
Okay, well, my friend Dave, my voice came back for a second. Wow, that was interesting. I'm possessed. It was, well, my friend Davis Doy was the producer of Zombie Island. And so he's really the person who's the actual hands-on producer. I was just a writer. So as we were coming up for different ideas, which harks back to, we were looking for different ideas for Scooby made for video. And so I would meet with Davis in his office and we'd say, well, can we do a vampire one? And we do this, and we do a haunted ship and that kind of stuff. And that's, eventually we settled on, I said, I'd like to do something in New Orleans. And zombies, and it's kind of New Orleans, and I like the food in New Orleans. And Davis had a crew of guys who, once we got the story idea okayed by Warner Brothers, he could start putting them, guys to do models of the characters, and then eventually, once we had a storyboard, and we could start doing layouts, and then it was a pretty. I think this one was done in Taiwan, and they had really good production value. Scooby-Doo, so they were spending quite a bit of money on it. So the production stuff I really didn't pay much attention to, except for the fact that it looked cool when the characters. There was a guy named Jim Stenstrom who actually I think was the producer or line producer of it. So there was a crew of guys that he had that would do the actual production. But for the story, once we had the story, broken down, Davis and I got like story credit, and I went back and started to write it, and then we go over it and we might change some lines and stuff like that. So I did the screenplay, and Davis worked on a bunch of Scoobies after I stopped working at, for Hanna-Barbera, which that's sort of an interesting story too. But he stayed there a little while longer and then went working somewhere else. So that's sort of a truncated version of the production process, which I was more from the writers. So for my process, it was get a premise for what was the story was going to be Haunted Island, and then go from there to an outline or an expanded premise, and then go into a first draft of the and then of course the network, Warner Brothers. I don't think they were paying much attention to what we were doing, because I think the home video was really like they were doing Addams Family retreads, the no Addams Family values, or whatever they were doing, the stuff with Daryl Hannah, and nothing much was going on. So they weren't, I don't know how hopeful they were about what they were going to do with an animated thing. And the reason that they chose Scooby was the part of the idea that I was saying about Seth, is that you had a bunch of different writers who were trying to come up with different ideas. So for a while, they thought maybe the first one would be a Flintstones one. So I submitted Cavemen in Black, like we were going to do Men in Black, but in cavemen time. And then Top Cat, they thought maybe they'd do Top Cat. So Seth was coming up with some ideas for that, and so was I. And then they finally zeroed in on Scooby. And so once they had that, then we could really concentrate full time. But they really weren't messing with what we were doing, which is how we got away with aging the kids up.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
immediately changed on the next one. So
it seems like you guys have a lot of creative liberty, not the usual studio puppetry that is usually associated with them.
it was nice to not have anybody looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that brings us to kind of talking about like what you brought to the Scooby-Doo universe with this film, and we were actually going to show a clip from the film. We're going to get that queued up and talk about the famous tagline of "This time the monsters are real," and just kind of dive into all the spooky stuff that happens. So Dustin, if you want to start sharing your screen.
That's a 90-minute clip, right?
Huh?
That's a 90-minute clip, right?
No, just a small 1 minute just to get us into the mood of, there we go.
Oh yeah, that's a classic scene.
Okay, tell me if anything doesn't work. This should all work.
It works.
But it feels real.
Yeah, you're just not pulling hard enough.
Okay, Mr. Macho, why don't you try it?
Sure. Hold this, Shag. Either hold it still or give it to Daphne. It's the gardener.
No.
It's the fisherman. No. It's the ferryman.
Oh.
Maybe it's real.
I told you it wasn't a mask!
It must be animatronic.
Oh,
Okay.
Classic.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's still, growing up, that was terrifying, but now it's amazing and hilarious. So as Christine mentioned, the tagline for this film was "This time the monsters are real." Commentators have noted that though there were instances of real monsters in iterations of Scooby-Doo before Zombie Island, they also note that this was the first time that the creatures were scary, not kind of cutesy or funny. What was the reasoning behind this development, and why did you and the production team decide to go in this direction?
Well, it was kind of annoying that every time you had Scoobies, it was somebody in a mask. And so that was something that, something interrupted a restart, meeting cancel. Something's on my screen there to continue.
It's okay, let me just keep talking.
I'll just keep
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah, we can still see
Yeah.
you and hear you. So if you can keep talking, that's fine.
If I hit that cancel thing, well, that won't cancel the meeting, though, will it?
Clicking cancel shouldn't cancel the meeting.
Okay, to continue. Cancel, try again. I've got a big blotto on my screen here.
If you want to, if you just want to keep talking, that's fine. And hopefully maybe it will go away or,
Yeah.
Or maybe I'll go away.
The challenges of Zoom. Zoom
Yes.
world.
All right, so I kind of wanted to bring the sensibility of the horror movies that, well, I didn't know DJ then, but except in his movie reviews. And just trying to bring this stuff into a scarier mode where it wouldn't be a monster in a mask. So I got rid of that stuff early on with all those things where I wrote the lyrics to The Ghost Is Here, where you do a few little beats, showing that. And I thought aging the kids up might be sort of fun because Velma could have a mystery bookstore and Daphne was going to be doing her Ghost to Ghost or Coast to Coast with Daphne Blake. And Fred was a royal cameraman. And Scooby and Shaggy, this was before 9/11, were going through luggage at the airport. Little did we know. So, but the horror movie stuff was just kind of a natural. And once nobody said anything about, aging them up, then we could, use that beat. And then with the monsters, the opportunity for those great tropes of, the eyeballs opening and Scooby drinking water, and then he sees a zombie in the water and they're playing, keep away with the head. And it was just, and then the whole bayou and the swamp, milieu was just, was great. And they just did really good artwork and they made the Morgan Moonscar, they made him pretty creepy. And so, and then I think that they found out after the movie came out that it really freaked out kids younger than 3. I think it gave them some sort of something for which there is no vaccine. But anyway, I was really happy with it and it seems to have held up, really well. You're probably referring to that guy's website where he has a whole, he goes through the whole thing and says how it changed Scooby forever. This time the monsters are for real. I can't remember if that was a tagline that they just came up in marketing but you can see the old video camera that Freddie was using and get that thing of the age from that.
Yeah, following up with that, did you have to deal with, while writing the story, deal with any rating restrictions at all, like between like PG and G? Because I know it's rated for G, but I was just wondering if you had to like juggle the content with getting the right rating for the film.
It was rated G for ghoulish. No, actually, it wasn't. It was made for video, so it wasn't I don't think it actually Did it finally come out? Was it PG or did it not have a rating? I'm not sure. I'm not sure it had a rating. I was going to show a clip of it at Our Lady of Mount Carmel at their school, and they wouldn't let me because it was either unrated or it was something, and it had never happened before. But no, the ratings weren't an issue because it wasn't a network. It wasn't a network show, so no one seemed to care if we had the guy's head flying around. And,
Yeah, I was
but,
gonna say. It's pretty graphic, even for animation for like 3-year-olds. So
Yeah, and I mean, you can easily tell how this focus on the monsters being real. I mean, it directly inspired the next, Scooby-Doo and Alien Invaders, because those aliens were, spoilers, real as well. Although they weren't as evil and it wasn't nearly as dark. But I know that this had a major long-lasting effect on the Scooby-Doo franchise. So I think it's an amazing direction to pivot. And I know that it was really, I mean, growing up in the 90s and watching the original series and then seeing these films, it was definitely a tangent and totally different, but it was super enjoyable, and it just revamped the entire premise of Scooby-Doo. So yeah, I think, Christine, did you have another question you were going to ask here, or?
Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to ask about the villain's like backstory, where we just go into the whole sequence where the pirates come in and basically demolish their colony. And I just wanted to ask in that moment, um, what were your intentions with it in terms of like deciding who the monsters are in this movie, in terms of making them real? Because to me, when I watched that scene, I was like, wow, these pirates just ruined their home, and so to me that they were the monsters. But I just want to ask how you felt about that and the reasoning behind it.
you mean that as far as the cat creatures having a reason?
Yeah, because they were kind of their whole like colony was killed off, and so it was just the two of them left, and the whole time we're thinking that the pirate was like kind of the villain, and then we find out that they kind of aren't, but then they are in terms of like the deed that they did.
I think there's a screenplay in there, Return of the Cat Colony. But no, I think that you may have given it more thought than I gave it. But that's because I wanted the monsters to be, you think they're bad, but they're really warning them. So that was the first incarnation, my thought. And I have to say that I, use cat creatures. I've also used it in a Johnny Quest, and I used it in a SWAT Kats, and I'm just going to keep using it until somebody says I'm plagiarizing my own stuff. But these ones were really pretty scary. So once I had the idea that the bad guys, well, who are they warning them about? And you don't really know until the end. There's stuff that's missing, like pieces of clothing from their, luggage, and the magic wax, but you didn't realize that there were these cat creatures until it's sort of the end. And Velma still finds the clue that that Simone was dragged. Wasn't dragged. She walked out, so she knew that. So that was kind of interesting, trying to do some detective stuff when you were doing a supernatural story. But as far as the colony and stuff, I just wanted an explanation of who was there first, and he was there to loot and various loot or whatever. But then over the years there were tourists and traveling salesmen and all sorts of little friends that were they got lured to the island. So there was a backstory there. But yeah, as far as there being a whole backstory about the cat creatures culture, and there might be reparations or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
We got a previous story.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. So moving into a little bit about the writing process for Scooby-Doo and the gang, they're, Scooby-Doo and Mystery Inc. are like major icons in media culture ever since the late 1960s. Given the tremendous legacy of the show, how did you balance remaining attentive to the kind of original tropes and character traits? So like Shaggy and Scooby loving food, Velma being nerdy, all of those things, while also adding new dimensions to the story. So in this one, for instance, we see that Daphne has learned self-defense. She's not the kind of, damsel in distress like in the original series. So how did you balance those two factors?
Well, it was nice to have all that, stuff to choose from. I mean, Scooby and Shaggy basically have two things, they're hungry or they're scared. And they've gone for like 50 years or something with this kind of stuff. And so you just find a different way to pile your sandwich high, and you've got to put it in an interesting location for food, so it was the crayfish, you squeeze the tail and suck the head, and so there was, that was sort of a given for food stuff. As far as Daphne, that was making her more of a take charge kind of gal. And, Velma still had her stuff, but, and Fred is in a minor role. And Scooby and Shaggy, I think the one thing that I was trying to add in this one was when they said, you can't bring him to Miss Lenoir's plantation, he's a dog. And Scooby goes, dog? Where? So I use that a bunch of times because of just like looking at the guy, because Scooby thinks he's a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really just, using, like with Scooby snacks, and, I said, okay, so they got Scooby snacks, so, they could go along, buddy. And, they use it to throw it like a football, and Scooby and Shaggy, they both, Shaggy eats it too. And it was stale. So you just, just kind of use with what you have. Like I used to tell the writers, just take something and just give it a different little twist and a little new spin on it.
Mm-hmm.
But, they had the, and of course with Scooby and Shaggy piles up the sandwich, to eat it. And, before he can eat it, Scooby sucked it all down. And the Pepper's gags are just naturals because you want to, see them put a head in a bucket of water and the steam coming out of their ears and hot pepper plantations. Some friends of mine always were telling me that I had food scenes in every one of my scripts, and I said I wasn't really aware of that. But they said, yeah, there's always a food scene. So I guess it was obvious to everybody but me. It's like someone once told me that I was really good at structure. And I said, that's something I never think about. It's just kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end. And sometimes you monkey around with the order and stuff like that. So there was a legacy. There was a good line, I think, in when they're at Cafe du Monde in New Orleans, and and Freddie's kind of flirting with Lena Dupree, and Daphne says, wipe the sugar off your upper lip, Romeo. So there was some good stuff that was almost sitcom-y, within the structure of the horror movie, the horror thing, and the thing. So we were touching a lot of things, but it was great because they all seemed to fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Sure.
and as a quick follow-up to that, and maybe this relates to the studio maybe having less kind of oversight over this particular production, but were there certain lines, like classic lines, that you felt you had to include, or that kind of are required to include in every Scooby-Doo, kind of like, let's split up, gang, or, if it weren't for you meddling kids, those kinds of lines? Did you feel like you had to add, a certain amount of those into this one?
Yeah, when you could use them, you could, like let's get out of here, Scoob.
Yeah.
And,
That was so good.
Scooby-Doo, where are you? And and then the girl ghouls are coming after them, and Shaggy says, well, we already have girlfriends. That might be action from the Hex Girls from the Witch's Ghost. But it's interesting that you say without the supervision of the studio, after Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island came out and sold like 1 million copies, of course, which I did not get $1 million. But they went right back to doing the kids as right back to the thing. They didn't continue that little offshoot.
Mhm.
It was sort of disheartening, but you got to see what you could do when they don't, get involved.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that knowing what to use of those things, you can, Scooby snacks. There's just ones you can plug in when you need to,
Mhm.
and if you can give it a new wrinkle, that's always good.
Did you hope that some of the new lines that you put in gets established as iconic Scooby-Doo lines that could be like written into like future iterations of Scooby-Doo?
Well, it's interesting because sometimes you get stuff handed to you. I mean, this is sort of a little tangential story, but my reward for doing Scooby-Doo, and I went to the wrap party of Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, and they were having cake and this other stuff. And so I was, then all of a sudden somebody says, "Oh yeah," and we're talking about the next movie we're going to do. And I said, "Huh?" And they'd already hired, 2 people to write another movie and never asked me to even come in and pitch or do anything, to do it. And so it was interesting. So I said, well, I guess there's nothing. And there was a woman there that was a development person that said, I had been in the business a long time and they wanted some new blood. So anyway, so I sort of let that lie. There was really nothing I could do about it. So my friend Davis called me about 3 or 4 months later, and he said, "Don't say I called, but they've asked every writer to fix this script, and they've gone through everybody, and everybody said they were going on vacation or had to leave town or whatever. But we can't storyboard this thing." They had hired a couple of guys that had worked on a Knight Rider live action special, and I guess they weren't really used to animation and things like that. So I started getting phone calls from the gal that was not the one that didn't hire me, but the one that was running the unit. And so they said, well, we'll give you a week to fix it, but there's no money, there's no credit, there's no. And I said, well, why would I want to do it? And to make a long story longer or shorter, is that it was a Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost. And there was just a throwaway there for this group that was playing called the Hex Girls. It was just like a banner. It said Hex Girls, tonight at so-and-so. So we took that. So I went in there with Davis, my producer friend, and we rewrote this thing in about 2 or 3 days. And the Hex Girls have been in a bunch of shows, I think, since then. And so it just goes to show you what, wasn't even being used by the original, guys. And then, of course, since I'd written songs and stuff, I wrote the lyrics into the scripts. So so the Hex Girls, I'm going to put a spell on you. They used some of the Go-Go's who were singing on it. And then I said, I'm going to put a spell on you. I'll do everything you want me to, mix it up in my little bowl, lose control. I'm a Hex Girl. And my friend Davis just goes, we are not worthy. We are not worthy. So it really kind of popped out of there, and I ended up getting paid. And maybe not, not counting, but they had to pay the other guys. And I did get a credit, and the Hex Girls live on. And then I guess I may as well continue the story. Is that since you talked about alien invaders, those are the 3 that I have my name associated with. And so I said to the boss of the unit, I said, if you're going to do a 3rd one of these things, now that the 2nd one has come out and I think was doing pretty good, you got to come to me for you have to at least come to me to do the story for me, I'm thinking I'm very smart. You have to go to me to do the story for the third one. And then, we'll negotiate in good faith for the script fee. So I met with Davis, he called and said they want to do another one. And so we went to lunch and we said, well, what about aliens? And then, and the alien falls for Scooby. And so I said, well, I'm going to do the outline for it to see if they approve it. So I did the outline, they approved it, and they offered me less than I got for the Zombie Island. This was 2 things later, so there's a little Hollywood warning. So anyway, I thought, well, I was really protected because I had this deal saying if you order another one, you got to pay me X number of dollars for the outline, and so one of the guys that worked on the show as an artist said, well, I'll do it for that. And so ended up, writing the script, and I just went on to, that was my last thing I did with the Warner Brothers, except to make a long story even longer, still have another second, is that I got a call from Davis one day, and he said, remember that idea that we had for a Jetsons movie? Well, a new guy just came in and took over the unit, and I pitched him the idea, and he wants to go ahead with it and do a script. So we did this whole script, and in which George becomes a baby, and then he ages up to the different kids, and then there was actually a scene where Cogswell Cog screws itself into Spacely Sprockets, and it was like a machine that could age you into. And anyway, regardless, it was a pretty funny script, I thought. And so we turned it in, and we didn't hear anything, and then we didn't hear anything because there were some contingent things. Davis was going to get money for producing, and if they went ahead with it, I would get extra money because he was getting producer money, so I would get the other thing. So we waited a couple months, and we never heard anything more about this Jetsons thing, except we even paid for the script. And then we got a call, and they said, well, the marketing department, wasn't sure there was a market for a Jetsons, made for video, made for direct-to-video. And I thought, wouldn't you do the marketing before you start paying people for the script? But I guess, and they've spent millions of dollars trying to do Jetson movies over the years, and anyway, so that wasn't my exact last. That was the last one that got made. It didn't come out, but I got to work on that one. So you never say never. Just means a good idea is a good idea, I guess, when it sees the light of day. Okay, I meandered there, but.
Cool. So we're gonna do one more question until we ask the audience, and they have submitted a ton of questions. So
Are they still here?
yeah, they're here. Every single one of them. Yeah. So my last question is, if there's anything that you can remember during the writing process that didn't make it into the actual film, like, is there any like scenes or characters or subplots that you wish made it to the end cut, if any, if there were any at all?
That's a really good question. I think it's been like, what, 33 years, 23 years.
Yeah. If not, that's totally fine. I realize it's been a long time.
But I think most of the stuff we wanted to put in there got in there. I'm trying to think if there's any other sequence that was, we got Scooby and Shaggy getting drained till they look like prunes, or California raisins. And
yeah,
I mean, it was pretty, those she creatures look pretty mean. So offhand, I don't think there was anything that we were going to put in that got cut.
that makes sense because you guys had a lot of creative liberty. So yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, Hannah, do you want to start off the Q&A session?
Yeah, so we actually have Cameron Bates. I think he actually wants to ask his question. So go ahead, Cameron.
Y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, hey y'all. Mr. Leopold, I just want to say it's an honor to talk to you, sir. I got a question for you. So my question is, starting in 1969 with Scooby-Doo, the original series, and you may have answered this already, but what made you want to take a darker tone with Zombie Island? Because, it was the nostalgic, I would have gotten away with it if it was for your meddling kids with the unmasking, but what's with the real monsters, because I love Zombie Island. I wonder what was going through your mind when you thought, hey, let's take this in a darker tone, which was absolutely beautiful, and seeing Zombie Island come together.
Well, I think it was just because I personally liked horror movies. I mean, and I liked them scary. And Scooby's, just weren't that scary, and they always had you locked into a formula where it was going to be somebody in a mask. So it was, so it's almost like just like a wish fulfillment. Like if you were going to say, like, I want to write my favorite thing, I've always wanted to see this or whatever. And just movies were getting more and more graphic anyway, as far as, what you could do with spooky, looks. But I think it was just the trope of, that's why it became so scary for kids that were younger than 3, because, their worldview was just shattered when they found out that the monsters were real. And so it was just something that we all sort of felt was, would have a really good look and a good production value, and would have those bits like, what if we did it this time where the head came off and it was a real head,
right?
And the eyes were popped open, and then we debunked all the stuff at the beginning in that song, the ghost is here.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of fun. And Terror Time, when they're running in, shock. So you kept all the things that people were familiar with, but you gave it a new spin. So it was an opportunity to do it.
For sure. Thank you for answering that. I do appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Your voice sounds nice and strong. I wish I had it to use.
Well, thank you much.
Cool. Steve, you have a question?
Hi, it's so good to be here. So my question is, do you think that the voice actors brought any qualities to the story that might have been as noticeable in the script, or like less noticeable when you were first writing it or creating it?
I just missed the first part of the question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll ask it again. Do you think the voice actors brought out any qualities to the story that might have been as noticeable when you were writing it?
So did they add stuff that I didn't think of?
Yeah.
Yeah, who was great in this? I'm going to blank on who did the thing, but the ferry driver. We should have never done do that. And I just, and so that's one that comes to mind, definitely. And because that was really pretty funny. And the other thing is just sort of a tangent, so it's sort of not going to answer your question, but this one had the same person playing, I think it was Scooby and Shaggy. It was Scott Innes, but Casey Kasem wouldn't do the movie because he was a vegetarian. And so I said, but the stuff in the food in New Orleans is, we're talking about crayfish, we're talking about, and he said, no, he's really strict about it. He said, can you make it ice cream? And I said, well, no, it's not going to be ice cream because it's, I respect somebody being a vegan. And he lost a ton of work doing that stuff. But I'm trying to think of who else in the movie, added something above and beyond. But the guy that did Jacques the Ferryman and the gals that played the cat creatures, they were pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
And Get Out, Morgan Moonstar, and they all were, they all brought some gusto to their role. So kudos to them. But good question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have a question from Jeremy. What's something you never get asked about that would surprise longtime Hanna-Barbera cartoon viewers if we knew the answer?
Whoa. Did I have a food scene in every script?
Are
Well,
are there any juicy kind of behind the scenes things that maybe we'd be interested in learning about?
well, the behind the scenes things was more like that kind of disappointment at not getting asked to, work on in the old Hanna-Barbera days when it was more like the company kept getting more and more corporate. So it used to be Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera, and there were two guys, and then they sold the thing to Taft Broadcasting, and then somebody else bought them, and then Turner bought them, and then Time Warner bought Turner, and Cartoon Network came out, and so everything got eaten by the bigger shark. And so in the old days, when it was some time to negotiate your contract, you would have just come and said, well, I just wrote Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island for you. It just sold 1 million, copies or whatever. And they had you negotiating and stuff. And then as it became more and more corporate, well, if he doesn't do it, we'll get somebody else. So, but as far as juicy tales, maybe there are, but I'm sort of blanking on what they are for Zombie Island specifically. But I just sometimes people tell you stuff that you didn't realize that you were. I mean, I did find out from somebody one time that he was mad at me because I didn't use him on a certain show, which I didn't even know he was interested in. He was interested in writing, nor was it a show that I was giving assignments out to people. But you find things out of it, here, but in terms of what they would know about me, I think most people know that I love horror movies, but I like music, so I've got that singing and songwriting part of the Gun Hill Road thing. So if you want to see that side of it, you can see every 40 years, and it's on video, and that's a whole other side of me that came before writing for animation. So I guess that might be the hidden side that's led me into the stockroom at Hanna-Barbera and meeting my wife. And so it's, I'd say it was having two different careers and segueing out of that. When I was, when you're young, you think that these things are just gonna, if not last forever, you're just gonna, you say, well, why? You were doing stuff with the Carpenters and Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin. And I said, yeah, but I was like 25 years old, and it was like, it all happened so fast. But so hearing this, and then we got like with Zombie Island, we had a hit record called Back When My Hair Was Short, and it was the only hit record we ever had. So every now and then it gets played on Sirius on the 70s and stuff like that. So that's a side of me that I'm not sure everybody knew that I did music. And even so, I didn't try and do my melodies and stuff. I wrote lyrics into the scripts because that was an easier way to do it. And I like doing stuff with rhymes anyway. So, and if a word had to be changed, it could be. But I think that sort of covers a lot of hidden TMC stuff. Is that the last question?
Oh no, I wasn't sure if you had more points to add. But we have a ton of questions left. I'm sorry if we don't get to all of them, you guys, just because we have like 9 minutes left. So we'll do the best we can. So there's a question from Doug/Catherine. I don't know if you want to ask the question yourself, but you feel free to unmute or turn your video. Yeah.
Sure. Hi.
Hi, Doug/Catherine.
Hi.
Hello.
This is so cool. we were wondering, because we rewatched the movie last night to get ready for this, and I love it when there is a strong female character. And it was so exciting to see Daphne have such a great role in this. And so we were wondering, what was the idea behind giving her such agency in the movie? She's such a great role model in this movie.
Yeah, I don't know if it was intentional, just because in the old days, she didn't really have much to do. And so, by having her be the focus of the TV show or whatever, it immediately brought her into a stronger thing. At one point, they were talking about using a real talk show host to like introduce it, which in retrospect was probably better they didn't. They were talking about Rosie O'Donnell. Maybe would be saying, this is Coast to Coast with Daphne Blake. But once you had the fact that she was, running the show, and she was no nonsense, and they're skeptical, but she'll, when she sees something, she'll know, they'll know it when they see it. I like it when they're looking for a real live ghost, and of course that's an oxymoron. But yeah, I think, once you had her character, she didn't really have much to do in the old ones. So by aging her up and doing that, and then having Freddie dutifully behind the camera, and Velma, always had her own gig, with her clues and the mystery bookstore. But yeah, she was a little underserved.
Mm-hmm.
Actually.
I loved how when at the very beginning of the movie, the way it was set up, because Daphne's talking about the formula, and talking about, she's talking about taking the mask off. And it was so great because I had forgotten how that sets it up to give you a little hint that the rest of the movie is going to be different, that it's not going to follow the formula.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice when you can just twist something a little bit, like where you see something like, I never saw that before. It gets harder and harder to do, though, as there's more and more, everything. But no, it's a good note. It wasn't anybody, it wasn't like instructions from on high, like we need a strong female. I mean, because Freddie is kind of a little vapid. It can be a little vapid.
I love that he was her cameraman, like the errand boy. That he became kind of secondary to Daphne and Vilma.
Yeah, and it gave him they had that little bit of jealousy, and Daphne and Fred, and yeah, I think it was a good choice. I mean, and Scooby and Shaggy are scared and hungry.
Yeah, thank you, Doug and Karen, for that great question. So I also have a question here from Jessica. I don't know if she wants to ask it. I'll pipe down if she does, but if not, she asks, how do you feel about the succession and different eras of the Scooby-Doo franchise, given that there's so many?
Wow, how do I feel about it? Well, it's just like one of those things where you're in one certain era, and the early stuff, as a kid, you watched, and then you can see. I think you even had the Harlem Globetrotters and Scooby-Doo, and they've had so many different incarnations that you don't get the privilege of being in on every one of the generational shifts. I think it was lucky just to be able to work on Zombie Island in relative tranquility and tap into some kind of zeitgeist that sort of worked better with Scooby than maybe the Harlem Globetrotters did. No offense to the Harlem Globetrotters or Sonny and Cher or some of the other, crazy combos of people. That some of these things are just, let's do the Flintstone Kids, and let's do the, then it's
Scrappy Doo.
Yeah, Scrappy Doo, like, you know. So you have to kill him off in the live action movie. But I mean, let me at him and I'll splat him, Uncle Scoob. So, I mean, it doesn't really affect me because as a kid, I was aware of some of the stuff, and then I'm actually working on some of the half-hour Scoobies, like Lock the Door, It's a Minotaur, and The Beast is Awake in Bottomless Lake, and The Warlock of Wimbledon. It gave me a chance to come up with some interesting titles and some goofy stuff. But then the homemade for video one was a whole different species of animals. So I'm glad that I got to work on ones from the 70s and then ones from the 90s too. So I think one was 78 and then this was 78. So I got to span some of those generational gaps, and not just, watch them, but actually have worked on them. And I worked on the Smurfs, I think, like 7 years out of the 9 years it was on. So that was sort of interesting. But by the time you get the Smurfs ready to go to outer space, it's time to go.
Yeah, and I'm going to turn it over to Christine to find the last question. Again, we're sorry there's so many questions here. We wish she had more time to go through all of them. But thank you, Glenn, for being willing to respond to all of these. But yeah, I'll turn it over to Christine.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I'm glad I'm here to respond.
There's so much pressure on this last question. Let's see here. Fen Skylar, you had a question about a sequel. Because we know there is a Return to Zombie Island. I don't know if you want Skylar, if you want to pop in, or I can also ask your question too. Okay, looks like maybe not, but there is a Return to Zombie Island, but that's kind of like very more recent. But his question kind of is if you had any story ideas for a potential sequel, like what would your version of Return to Zombie Island look like?
Well, I just sort of cursorily glanced at what they did, and I think they win a contest to go somewhere, and they ends up being Zombie Island. But then it looks sort of similar to. So when I was monkeying with an idea, it was sort of. Well, it wasn't going to be they win a contest. I think I never really played with it that much because I wasn't hired to do it. So it was just kind of but make it more mysterious and, I don't know if they brought the cat creatures back or what they did on the thing. But it looks like they used a lot of the template of what we did on Zombie Island. So I don't know. I didn't give it enough thought to, to really opine on what I would have done differently since I haven't seen what they did.
Yeah, it is interesting.
To Zombie Island, or it turns out to be Zombie Island, was, I guess that works. I think they were just looking for something to package together to sell, the 2 DVDs.
For sure. It does. The movie does end and like there is kind of not a Zombie Island anymore because they all turn into skeletons and so it is interesting that they decided to return even though there isn't like a a Zombie Island to go back to. But yeah, thank you so much for coming and giving us your time. It was a really wonderful talk and we all appreciate you. And thank you to the guests for coming to this event. And this was really exciting and getting to talk about this movie that has played such a huge role on the Scooby-Doo franchise. And we just want to thank you, Glenn, for your time. In terms of our next Magic Lantern event, it's on February 5th for Save Yourselves, and feel free to follow us on social media at official Magic Lantern for Instagram, and then Magic Lantern SB for Twitter, and then just Magic Lantern on Facebook. Thank you all again.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, awesome.
Glenn. A round of applause for Glenn.
Thank you. My voice is so scratchy, but I haven't had that much use.
And have a good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
Or wherever you are. Have a good day.
Okay.
Okay.
So we gotta...
Have a good inauguration.